Thank you very much. Thank you for all being here. And let me add my most sincere thanks to the thanks expressed by the previous speakers already. Just add on a personal note, my immense pleasure of being in Rome and specifically of being at an event related to the Italian Society for Neuroscience, of which I have been a very long time admirer. Good, let's go. Right. What is striking about this? What is striking about this picture? Well, if you, at a quick glance, you see that a painter is painting flowers while she's surrounded by pictures, by paintings, all that have bodies in them. Okay. So we can have deep thoughts about what the allegory of painting is in this, but this is just an introduction to my theme that actually bodies are everywhere. Since the earliest representations, pictorial representations, we have seen images of bodies of any possible. This is not such a recent one. What I want to point out with that is the human brain is tuned to see bodies even with very complete or very distorted information, like here. Okay. Various distorted, of course, examples of distorted information. I should have added the name of the painters, but certainly some of you will recognize them. Most recently, in most recent times, we have been exposed not just to normal bodies, to natural bodies, biological bodies, but we have been exposed to, we have interactions with avatars, we've interactions, of course, with sculptures of bodies, and we have interactions with robots. So bodies already were everywhere, and now we even have more and different representations of bodies. So, having said that, what is the relation between art and the brain, specifically in the case of the body? The goal of studies of art and brain-based studies, brain-body-based studies in general, is to understand the brain mechanisms that are engaged during aesthetic experience, aesthetic and related experience in the widest sense. Sometimes, since people, for example, started using the label neuroaesthetics, this has been seen as reductionist, as taking away the mystery of art. As you saw in some of the preceding talks, you can talk in a scientific way about artistic expressions without taking the mystery of art. But there have been criticisms of this endeavor related to that. In fact, and interestingly, some of the most ardent supporters of studies, brain-based studies of arts, are found among the artists themselves, which is a nice encouragement for that. So, theories about art have had a long and complicated relation with issues about emotions. There are traditionally two very extreme views. They're really extreme in the sense that one view says that art is about conveying emotions. And of course, specifically, that works out nicely for music. And sometimes artists that are not in the domain of music envy musicians because they seem to have this more direct access to expressions of emotions in music. There is, of course, another view, namely what I sort of paraphrase a little bit, of caricature a little bit, that basically art is about art. Art is not about subjective emotions of anything. Art is sui generis, is really about art and not about experiencing emotions. Sorry. We've had in the last 10 years a bunch of different disciplines actually that originate in the concern of relating art and science. There is, of course, visual neuroscience, there is neuroaesthetics I mentioned. We now have people working in computational aesthetics. We have people working in computational neuroaesthetics. So bringing art and the brain together has, of course, led to an explosion of those disciplines. In one of the previous talks, we had already some mentioning about different ways of approaching the relation between art and science. One is, and this is getting to the core of my topic, some people have thought that the aesthetic experience, the locus of the relation between art and the brain, is in an area in the brain that is sensitive to beauty. And that has been related to certain properties of the object, as we saw, for example, in attractiveness. So is art, one line of work in this area is, art is what we need to be concerned about in studies of art and science is finding the properties of the object that trigger the aesthetic experience. Okay? Another approach is to relate, of course, those properties to the reward function they have, as we also heard in one of the previous talks. That has led some people to propose some kind of hybrid or combined model of art and the brain. Namely, we have the sensory motor component, we have the emotion valuation reward, and we have the meaning knowledge. And these three come together in defining the power field of brain-based studies of art. So slightly to phrase this differently or to recapitulate, there's two lines of thinking on this, namely, one is like the primacy of the object. Okay? The artistic experience is triggered by properties of the object. The other line of thought is the artistic experience is triggered in the observer. For example, there is an area in the brain that is specifically devoted to either reward or beauty along those lines of properties. And we, of course, have had various proposals for that. My personal view, and one I would like to articulate in very few words and in a very unsatisfactory way, given my limited understanding of these matters and the limited time available, both together, is that we have to go beyond this dualism of saying art is a property of the object or art is an emotion in the subject. We have to find some kind of, we have to sort of dig deeper underneath this object-subject dualism. And my way of doing that, my proposal to do it is that we have to take the case of body perception as a special case that will lead us into a better understanding, towards a better understanding of artistic experience. You have noticed that the core concept for me is really artistic experience. Okay? I'm not talking about art as an object, not talking about art as a subjective emotion, but about artistic experience. And artistic experience is, in my view, and that's the view I will defend in a little time here, is rooted in the body. Okay? Now, to understand that, because that's still a very general statement, but to understand that, I will take a small detour to the kind of work we do in my lab, namely study how people perceive bodies. And it's not so much about the detail of the brain studies than about what they will reveal us about the special status of the body, which I will argue is the lead into understanding artistic experience. This is just one study very recently where, in collaboration with people who do monkey imaging, we compare the specificity of perceiving human bodies versus monkey bodies versus human bodies versus objects and faces. Okay? These are actually videos, but I'm not showing them as still pictures. Okay? We do find that certain areas, it's not about the areas, don't worry about the areas, but the notion is specific areas of the brain are selective for human bodies, for moving human bodies as opposed to monkey bodies to objects, etc. Okay. Now, by itself, that's not a very startling claim, because many people outside neuroscience are now used to this. I do see them here. Many people outside neuroscience are now used to this notion that there is areas in the brain doing something, but that's not the point of my claim. The point of what I want to show here is the kinds of areas that do this. The kinds of areas that do this are the ones that are really important. And you see here that it's not just one brain area doing bodies. By extension, I do disagree with people. And there is a tendency, there is a literature out there saying that when you see a body, the body area in your brain lights up. And when you see a beautiful body, the body area in your brain lights up more. Okay? So I mean, that's a view in the literature. That's not a view that is supported by our studies on body perception, because first of all, you see that it's not just one area, it's a whole network of areas, and interestingly, that network is specific for human bodies, for perception of dynamic human bodies here. And it has it has the areas that have already shown up in previous talks. It has, for example, it has subcortical areas, it has the amygdala. That's an incomplete picture. But again, it's not about the brain pictures. It's really about the notion that there is a network. The network of perceiving bodies is not just a network where the body as an object of perception is seen. Another example from the same thing, we found in our studies that the brain is very sensitive to certain specific properties of the human bodies. Here, for example, we did an analysis on videos. We can analyze properties of the bodies. We can do the related computational analysis of body videos to brain areas, and we see that specific, for example, here you see that the feature limb contraction, which is a specific feature of the body, limb contraction is coded in the brain in areas related, for example, known from the literature as fear, quote-unquote, areas. So not only does the brain specifically code for the human bodies in areas that are unrelated to the simple object, body as object of perception, but these areas can be detailed. We can look into more detail in them and see what expressions they convey and by which means they convey them. Here, properties of the coordinated properties of the movement of the body. Another little piece of evidence. In a very recent study, we showed that the brain is sensitive to the orientation of the bodies, left or right turned, and that that the areas coding for that are corresponding to the way the own body is turned around. So you really use your own, but I want to argue, of course, you use your own body to perceive bodies. Now, on to a study we did a couple of years ago, and where we actually used bodies in painting, and wanted to know this very simple feelings. I'm not talking about emotion. I'm talking about feelings of pain and pleasure. How we could have a closer look on those in the brain. So we took a selection of San Sebastian paintings, and we took a selection of. You see, that is sort of funny. They have those arrows, and we made a version of the paintings as they are painted, and we made a version where the arrows are taken out, so to create these two conditions of pain and pleasure. Okay? That's the arrows taken out. Then we went to our female body paintings, and we took the arrows we had taken out of the San Sebastians, and we put them in the female body, and which was actually for the people in the lab this is quite delicate work, because we had also to move all the little drops of blood on the body. They also had to be moved to So we created female bodies with arrows, and that's too fast. That allowed us to have two similar conditions. We showed those images in a 3 Tesla scanner, but we did not give any instructions. Because in the very few studies we did that directly deal with paintings, we never ask people, do you like it or don't you like it? Is it beautiful or is it not beautiful? For we have our reasons for that, and we can expand on that later. But it's important to notice that we did not focus any instructions on. We had an oddball task, which is some jargon for how people put together their fMRI study. So, and this is just one study underscoring the point I'm trying to make with this little glimpses of brain studies. Namely, we have evidence across a bunch of different studies that the observer uses his own body to perceive bodies in daily life, in painting, etc. Okay? So these are experiential structures of the brain. They are not object representations of the brain. Therefore, hence my argument that artistic experience, beauty may be, that's a different story. I don't think art is about beauty, but that's a terrible thing to say, I know. But artistic experience is not about the object of experience, but is about the experience triggered by that. It's about the representation in the brain of the brain-body interactions generated by this. For example, one structure that is absolutely central in this constellation of brain-body interaction is the insula. As you see here, that's a picture of the insula, a recent picture of the connectivity of the insula, and you see that the insula, which is a fairly well, it's not a modest structure, it's a fairly big structure in the brain, but it has a fantastic connectivity with all sorts of cortical and subcortical brain areas, all of which have been named in the previous papers, actually. Okay? So also the insula is very important because it's the threshold for awareness of what you feel. Okay? In this framework I'm developing, and this may have been misleading, I should point that out explicitly now, emotions, in a biological perspective, emotions are really action structures, that action programs that are laid down in the brain through evolution. By contrast, feelings are the kind of awareness, minimal awareness that can go to bigger, to more important awareness, but awareness of and that arises at the interface of bodily processes and neural processes. We've heard in the first talk, for example, very nice illustrations on how memories change the neurobiology of the organism. So it's this kind of brain-body interaction is absolutely central in as I would like to argue, for aesthetic experience. It's an experience before we talk about the properties of the object. Okay? So now, and that's actually already my final slide. Now, what the deep and sort of strange thought through the guiding line through my putting together the different aspects of our studies in this presentation is that body perception can function as actually, I wouldn't say a model organism, but a model for understanding art experience. Because in body perception, we find structures of the brain that are not involved in the standard classical view on object perception. There are all those other structures. For example, I should have pointed out in the study of the pain and pleasure in the brain, we find insula, we find anterior cingulate. Also, very interestingly, we find somatosensory cortex. When you watch a painting like the ones I saw here, you have activity in somatosensory cortex. Now, somatosensory cortex activity is typically associated with being touched by somebody else. So when you see a body, you have brain activity in somatosensory cortex as if you were touched. On the other hand, being touched is actually the interface between your body and the world. Okay? So that's why those are some of the arguments I would like to develop for arguing that body perception is unique among all other kinds of perceptions we have. Maybe hearing your own voice does something similar, but I'm not sure. But body perception combines this inside and outside these insides and outside processes, interoception and exteroception, and could figure as the kind of core or the kind of model to understand artistic experience. Okay? This does not invalidate any kind of more objective based approach to artworks too, but it is a core element that indeed in the literature has been pretty much ignored in past work. Now, why do I call that? Why do I sort of metaphorically would like to present that as in art experience you sort of grow a meta-body, because in art experience it's also a little bit like driving a car. When you drive a car, the body becomes the extension the car becomes the extension of your own body. You feel the closeness of objects that actually don't touch your body, they touch your car. So what I would like to argue is that in art experience something very similar happens. Now, the easiest to make the case is, of course, architecture. Okay? When you look at a building, you feel inside the building. You feel the building around you as an extension of your body. People are, of course, not too often aware of that, but there is an increasing interest among architects also. We have actually one little grant where we have a collaboration with Zaha Hadid in the office in London, where we look into those things. But I hope I can sort of convey the bodiness of those, buildings. Of course, with the Pompidou one, it's very clear. You can see it's almost a cabling. It's almost a cabling of the visual system you can see in there. It's very clear also with the Louis Vuitton Foundation, and it's equally very clear with a different architect in whose work we are actually here right now. So my sort of, this kind of, it's not just an extension of your own body, like the car is felt as an extension of your own body, but it's like an enrichment, a meta-body. And through that kind of concept, which should be developed, I hope on the next occasion maybe, I want to also integrate or interactions with video art or interactions with avatars and those different things, because there also we have to explain how an avatar can be, how you can be present in an avatar, what people call embodiment, and in the same way. Art experience makes you extend your presence, makes you present in this kind of environment, imaginary environment, as it has been devised, as your artistic experience has actually been designed by the artist. Okay? Because no artwork exists without the artistic experience of the person participating in it. And I want to stress the kind of bodily experience that this is, that how we may look upon this as some kind of bodily experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor de Gelder, for a very inspiring talk. And first question there. Sì, arriva.
Thank you, Bea, for underlining and highlight this crucial point of artistic perception and desire, let's say. I want to underline a point that you just mentioned in your experiment, that there are gender differences, perhaps, in the appreciation, and in particular in the level of empathy that gender can produce and the brain process artistic materials. Do you have, in your slides, it was evident that females highlight more and more these limbic structures when looking at an artistic picture with some strong empathic component, such as wands and so on. Do you have other evidence that females are more empathic in this body involvement, also for artistic perception?
That's a very, very complicated and a very, very tricky question, of course, that has many, many explanations. Some of them may be sociological. It may be that women are closer to bodily experience, have had different occasions on which to be closer to their body. Those are all factors. There is also the issue that gender is a complicated word also. And may play differently in different areas of human experience. So this is certainly something to be investigated. A limit of brain imaging studies is that you need big cohorts. Like in this, you need, like at the very least, you need to have 25 male, 25 female, or you need to, that's a practical limit. Also, you need to have a better assessment of what gender people identify with more and on what occasion. I mean, these are all very big open empirical issues that luckily we are on the way to at least putting on the table now.
Questions? I thank you again very much indeed.